Hello, and thanks for joining us. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Communicating Water to Your Board. My name is Tess Clark. I work here at the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. I'm happy to report that today we have a diverse audience for the webinar. You can see that we have attendees from across the country, some folks from all the way up north and also from Hawaii. There's about 150 people registered. You can receive a certificate of attendance today for viewing this webinar from the American Waterworks Association. This webinar has not been submitted to licensing agencies for pre-approval of continuing education credits. You must check with your licensing agency to learn about its rules, criteria, and what you need to do in order to receive credit for your attendance. If you need assistance in applying for credit to your licensing agency, please contact Education Services at awwa.org. For attendees that have an AWWA customer record, your certificate will be uploaded within 30 days of the webinar date. For attendees who do not have a customer record, you will receive an email from AWWA in order to create one, and you will need to do that to receive your certificate. If you do not create a customer record, you will not receive a certificate. This is one of several webinars that we conduct here at the EFCN, and it's for our Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. We provide training and technical assistance to small public water systems in all 50 states and 5 territories, mostly to help local water systems achieve and maintain compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. Here you can sort of see a picture of our team. We have network members across the U.S., centers in most major U.S. regions. And here you can see the services that we provide, mainly workshops, trainings, and direct technical assistance on all of the topics that you're seeing here. And this includes asset management, rate setting, leadership, energy management, and many others. We also have a small systems blog. You can learn more about water finance and management through this blog, and the blog posts also feature lessons learned from our trainings and technical assistance, descriptions of tools, and also some small system success stories. We will give you the opportunity to subscribe to this blog at the end of the webinar. And one last resource I want to point out to you before we get to our presentation is our online funding sources map. This tool can help you find the major funding sources for drinking water for each state and territory. Here's how you access those tables. On the EFCN homepage, go to the Resources tab, and then click on Funding Sources by State, as you can see here. This will take you to a map of the country. If you click on the state that you're interested in, you will find a PDF table of the relevant sources for drinking water funding for that state. The table looks like the image on the left of the slide. For each program, it includes the name, a short description, and contact information for someone that you could reach out to. Before I turn our presentation over to our expert today, I have a few quick polling questions. We're just going to get started with those. Also going to show you our disclaimer quickly. The first is, what kind of water or sewer utility do you represent? So just pick one of the following: for-profit, local government, not-for-profit, or another water utility, or not a water system. Looks like we are getting almost everyone's votes in, so I'm going to give you 3 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. All right, and I'm just going to share these results so we can sort of see who's in the room with us today. It looks like the vast majority of folks are from local government or municipal systems, and then we just have a small minority of for-profit systems at 3%, and then an even sort of split around 15% for other utilities and not-for-profit associations. Okay, and then one last, the next poll that we have is, what size water or sewer system does your utility operate? We're actually doing 3 polls to get started today, so pardon me, we still have one after this. Just tell us to the best degree you can based on the number of people served. I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to put your response in here. 2, 1. All right, and again, it looks like we're looking at approximately 30% are small systems, approximately 25% are medium systems, and we do have, maybe between 13 and 12% are very small systems. And we also have 13% large systems, so that's great. Okay, and lastly, here's a poll that will kind of get us prepped for our presentation today. What are the barriers to communicating effectively to your board? You can select one or more of these. Just pick the ones that you think make sense for you. You don't know how to talk about technical information. Maybe you don't read the agenda. They don't read your agenda packet, or you don't want them to shoot the messenger. Go ahead and tell us what you think about that. All right, looks like almost everybody is good here. At this point, I'm gonna just share these results quickly. Looks like we have a really strong showing for I have no problems communicating with my board. Also, the majority of folks, 40%, are saying their board members just have other priorities. And at this point, this is a really good point for me to turn things over to Tanya Braun-Lewa. Tanya is Program Manager at Wichita State University Environmental Finance Center. So Tanya, I'm going to make you the presenter and you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you all for taking that poll and telling me a little bit about what the barriers are to communicating with your board. It looks like a lot of you are already doing a really good job and feel like there's not a whole lot going wrong with your communication and how it's working between your utility and the board. And then I feel like a few folks, there might be some frustrations. It looks like I think the major concern that a lot of folks have is just getting the time in, getting the board to kind of put down their pens and really focus in on the utility, because they do have a lot of other competing projects and issues and community things that are going on, that getting the utility kind of their time slot to really get focused on is a barrier. So hopefully I can share with you some ideas and tools and techniques to use to really get the board to focus in and think about the utility when it's needed to make good decisions for your community and for your water utility. And good communication, that's one of those things that can make or break a job, or either it makes it easier or it makes it really difficult. So on the webinar, we're going to go through the roles of the board, the staff, and the customers, just because defining those roles helps us aim our messages as we're communicating to the board. Then we're going to talk about how we can communicate effectively, and then talk about the what and when to communicate to your board. So talking about the roles, I think it's good to really go over with your board at least once a year, and especially as soon as new board members come on the board, to just review their duties as the quote-unquote owner or responsible party for the water utility. As the board member, it's kind of that responsibility for providing safe, clean water is on their shoulders. And so reminding them of that important responsibility for the community is a good idea, especially, and kind of keeping that in the forefront of their mind, so that they remember that the utility, even though nothing major may be going on with it right now, it still is a major part of their responsibility to the community. They have a duty of care. That's just that care to make good decisions, to research as much as possible. It doesn't mean that all their decisions have to be, perfect, but it's making that best decision for the good of the community and the utility. And then the duty of loyalty that they have to the utility, always acting in the interest of the utility and the community, and not to self-interest, of course. And then the duty of obedience, following all of the mission of your organization, the bylaws, the policy, and then of course all the state and federal regulations as well. The whole purpose of the water utility, and thus the purpose of the board's responsibility to the water utility, is to provide safe drinking water and at an appropriate cost to the community. That means you're getting good quality water served to folks, it's reliable, and it's affordable. And we all know that safe drinking water is not something we can take for granted. Even if it's been safe and we haven't had any problems for 25 years, that doesn't mean something can't happen. There are just too many potential sources for technical breakdowns, physical breakdowns, or sources of contamination. We can't not be vigilant. So just reminding your board about those things. And then, of course, there's always, they're legally required by the federal Safe Drinking Water Act to follow all the rules and regulations of that legislation. And then, of course, most states that administrating agency is the state, and they're going to ensure that you're complying with that Safe Drinking Water Act. So what's each board member's individual role? As a board member, first of all, be a good team member. Work with your team for the community. And then, they need to be prepared for meetings. They're going to set policies that are effective and legal. They need to support a certified operator. One of the major roles of a board member to the utility is to make sure they've got good operators that have the adequate certifications. You're attracting good folks to work there by making sure your salaries are competitive. They have access to professional development and training. You want to be fiscally responsible to make sure that overseeing the finances, making sure there's enough money for the system to run. You can pay the operator a good salary. You're providing all the safety equipment and the technology software that's needed to run the system well, and that you're planning for the future. What's your community doing? Is it growing? Is there a new business coming in? What can you do to prepare for those changes in your community? And of course, every board, public board, you want to act transparently and communicate to customers. That's a board member's role. And again, we're going over these just because these are the types of things you want to share with your board on a regular basis, so they remember their role in this for the utility. The staff's role, you're the day-to-day. The staff, you're repairing, you're testing, you're maintaining, you're troubleshooting. You're completing those day-to-day tasks so that the elected officials can focus on those big picture, big policy issues. Part of your role as a staff member is to communicate with the board every now and then, discuss with them big projects, how the finances are looking. We'll talk more about that, like what and when later in the presentation. But you're implementing all the policies the board creates and then talking to the board about how it's worked and making adjustments as needed. You're providing customer service, maintaining all those good records. And then the customers have a role too. They don't just get to sit this out and be users and not participators. So making sure that the customers know they need to be good, wise consumers, stay informed, understand the importance of the utility to their community, making sure you fix leaks and install water efficient devices, and communicating. Customers need to communicate with their board and their utility to let them know what level of service they want. So the customers have a role too. And of course, we want all of these parts and pieces, the staff, the board, and the customers, to be in a constant circle of communication, all talking to each other in that give and take, so that the utility knows what the community wants and the board is aware, so they can make good policies and decisions. So how do we communicate with this board that's going to make decisions for our utilities? You as someone who works for the utility, you're working 40, 50 hours a week doing water work. How do you whittle that down and get the board to really focus on the utility, maybe a couple of times a month for an hour or so? If you're lucky, you'll get that much time. So how do we create a strategy to talk with our board to help them make the best decisions for the utility? So we're going to go through a few communication rules and tips that you can add to your skills toolbox for your communication strategy. And the first tool I want us to think about is storytelling. This might not be how you usually do reports and talk to your board, but it's something to really think about adding to your toolbox. Everybody loves to listen to stories. Stories help capture people's attention, and they help the audience remember what you said even after the meeting is over. So a quick story about stories. So I used to work at the extension office in the county where I live, and we had a board that we reported to, and we have 11 extension agents, and at every meeting, each extension agent would go through and give a report, and usually it ended up us just reading a bullet point list of all the things we did that month. You know, we had helped 23 people with pond weed questions. We had 100 people at the backyard chicken class. I completed the naturalist workbook, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just a bunch of bullet points, something they could have read in the written report that I gave them. And I'm just reading it to them basically, because it felt like I needed to prove that, you know, they were paying me. I should tell you all the things that I'm doing to prove I'm worth my salary. Well, it got to be long. No one would remember what we said because they kind of zone out, because it's not that interesting to listen to someone read a bullet point list of numbers and dates. So we changed our tack to go with a 3-minute story. Each extension agent got 3 minutes to tell a success story or a lessons learned story. So we changed it to stories. And so here's an example of just one of the stories that I shared with my board. So Jennifer is a mother of 3 school-aged children, and she was thinking about getting chickens to help teach her kids responsibility. She was allergic to dogs, so they're going to go for chickens. Her neighbor told her it was illegal to have chickens in town, so she called the extension office. Someone suggested she call us, and she did, and I invited her to the backyard chicken class. After the class, she told me that the class was helpful and she learned that she could have chickens, and she now knows better how to take care of them. So I followed up with Jennifer actually like 6 months later, and she had bought 6 chickens, 2 chickens for every kid to take care of, and they were loving all the fresh eggs. They were saving money on grocery bills. The kids even decided to take the leftovers to eggs that they couldn't eat to the food bank. And Jennifer told me that without the class that she attended, she would never have made the chicken coop predator proof, and the raccoons would have gotten her chickens like day 1. So that's what my story would be. So that's, you know, as the board heard that story, they had a better idea of what and why we did the programming that we did, not just a list of classes and how many people attended. They remembered past the end of the meeting what we had said and the projects that we were doing, and we started to see more board involvement and more board promotion of our programs because they remembered and started talking out in the community about what we were doing. So using storytelling is very effective because stories are timeless. Stories are demographic proof. No matter what age, race, gender, background of any kind, everybody likes a story. Stories are contagious. They spread. People tell people, and you know, facts are 20 times more likely to be remembered if they're part of a story. No one ever said, "Oh my goodness, you never would have guessed the amazing PowerPoint I just saw." No one's going to remember this PowerPoint, but you might remember the chicken story. So, you know, we want to continue to use stories. Stories allow the board member to put their pencil down and focus in. You know, if you go up, you know, board members, they're thinking about stuff, writing notes, taking notes, reading through the reports that you give them. But as soon as you get up there and start telling a story, they're going to put their pen down and look up, look at you and focus in, because they want to listen to that story and get engaged in the story. And using those stories allow us to show respect to the board, and by telling them something in a way that allows them to draw their own conclusions, it helps them be able to learn without you just saying, here's how it is and what's going on. So stories are very effective, and I encourage you to start using them. So how do you craft a story? Well, we have to aim our stories. And so when we take aim, we consider the audience, the intent, and the message. First, we think about our audience. Who are you talking to? You're talking to your board. Each member of your board is going to have different likes, dislikes, personalities, management styles, priorities. You know, think about how as you're thinking about stories and how you're going to talk about the things that you're going to talk about in your report, how do they make their decisions? Are they logical? Do they need statistics and research? Or are they more emotional and they need stories? They want to know about public input or about the impacts on the community. You're going to have both types of people on the board. So if you use both kind of those stats and research and that story and combine those, you're really going to hit everybody and get everyone engaged and interested in what you're trying to share with them, or convince or like influence them in a certain decision. Know what your audience's triggers are, what stresses them out, or like a passion, what are they passionate about? You want to kind of hit that good middle ground. A cold board takes no action. If there is nothing interesting that strikes their fancy, likely this is some of the folks that that said, you know, you can't get your board to focus on the utility or to think about the utility or to read your reports. Well, likely it's because they're cold. They can't connect to a water utility. You know, most folks don't need to know, or they don't care about how the water system works and how we clean the water and send it to them so that they can have, you know, coffee in the morning. But if you tell a story that connects them to, you're not going to have coffee in the morning if we don't fix these things at our utility, that's a trigger. They're like, oh, wait, I need to grab onto this message that they're trying to tell me. So you want to, but if you trigger them too hot, it's going to get frustrating. They're going to kind of turn off because the knob has gone too far the other way and we've triggered them too much. So it's this kind of Goldilocks just right. We got to turn the heat up, but not too hot so that they kind of burn out and are too stressed and they shut their walls down. And so the board has a lot of stuff to think about. They're overseeing lots of different departments. They may have other jobs that they're also focusing on, full-time jobs. So we know that they're already stretched thin, and we need to appreciate the work that they're doing for us, and kind of make sure that as we're talking to them about new things, we give them some background. We don't speak in jargon. We appreciate the time and energy they're putting in. But think about your board. Think about the things they're passionate about. How are they involved in the community? What different types of things are their favorite things about the community, and relate the stories or the examples that you give to those things so that they can really connect and then focus in on the utility, because it is connected to them and they find that part, their own part in what you're asking or talking to them about. All right, so we know our audience. Then we have to have an intent. Why are we telling this story? We can't just tell a story to tell a story. We need to have a purpose. So, you know, that purpose could be we're introducing a new topic. If you start something new, it's always good to get it introduced in a fun and interesting way so that you're engaged from the beginning. Are you trying to influence the board to make a certain decision? You can tell a story that helps them realize the importance of a decision that they're going to make. Are you just trying to inform them and simply give them an update on a current issue? Are you trying to motivate them to action? Or maybe you're trying to promote something, like give appreciation to an employee or a department for a job well done. All those different things could be a reason that you're telling the story. And then what's the takeaway message? There are two options for the message part. You can, this is the moral of the story, and tell them outright. You know, say, you know, tell the story, and then at the end say, what I want you to remember about this story is, and then tell them. Or you can just let them decide what that means. So if you're telling a story about aging infrastructure and how something broke, and the age, you know, you got a leak because your distribution infrastructure was old, and it's, you know, there's leaks are going to start happening more and more. Tell them a story about the hospital didn't have water for a couple hours because we had to fix this leak, and then maybe kind of leave it there and see if they see, you know, what should we do comes from them instead of comes from you. Kind of depends. I mean, and that is just an example I made up on the spot. I'm sure you have better examples. So really think about, do I want to tell them, or do I want them to ask questions and kind of formulate their own thoughts and ideas about what's next? All right, after the story, we've told a story. Now we got to align our report, the facts and the figures, the PowerPoint slides, the graphs and charts. Align the story to what you're going to tell them after the story. Dive into your report, point them to the key things in your written report that the story aligns with. You know, if you only have a few minutes with the board and you tell the story, then show them where in your written report where that connects, and then let them decide then how to move forward on the different action items. All right, like I said before, you've got hours and hours, 2,000 plus hours every year working for the water utility. You've got a lot of information. How do we sift it down and refine it to the essentials that the board needs to know? How do we do that? Well, we're going to talk a little bit more with like specific details about that in the second half of this presentation. But as we're talking about it, or as you're prioritizing information, either these are a bunch of different projects and prioritize them, or you're talking about one project, you always want to start with the essential information first. Start out by telling the board about the information they need to know in order to understand the situation. Don't start with a bunch of details, start with the meat and potatoes, and then, because your audience could stop listening, the board could stop reading, could stop listening after, you know, the crucial information is given. So start with the crucial stuff, then go into, you know, things that are good to know, and then kind of the flourishes that are just nice to know. This is how news writing happens. That's what this pyramid talks about, news writing. If you read a newspaper article, if you just read the first paragraph or two, you know the whole story, but you don't know all the details. So you read the first two paragraphs, you know what happened, and then you get all the fun details and extra stuff as you continue to read the article. So same thing with talking to your board and presenting to your board. I like to look at it, instead of that boring old pyramid, I like to look at it like an ice cream sundae. So the essential information is like the ice cream. You don't need the toppings or the hot fudge, but you've got to have the ice cream for an ice cream sundae. So give them the ice cream and then add in the hot fudge. It's good to know, but it's not necessary. And then that extra cherry on top, extra information. All right, so that was the first half of what we've got. So we've got sharing. Be sure to share the roles and responsibilities with your board of their responsibility at the utility. Storytelling, aim your stories, and then be sure as you're talking about your utility projects, programs, whatever, to really think about that ice cream sundae. Tell them what they need to know for sure, and then add in the details. And so if you want to know more about storytelling, these are some great books that you can look up, order them on Amazon, whatever, find them at your bookstore. These are great ways to use stories at work to influence, to share what you're doing. So I really highly recommend these books. All right, I'm going to pass it back over and we're going to take a poll.
Awesome. You don't have to pass it over, it'll just actually go on there. So we're going to go ahead and run this next group of polls. So first, how often do you report about what's going on at the water utility to your board? And then just tell us if it's once a month, once a quarter, once a year, or rarely or never. Okay, and it looks like we're still in process here, so I'm going to give you 3 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. And Tanya, can I go ahead and share these results?
Sure.
Awesome. So the majority, so 79% are saying about once a month is what they do. However, there are, we have about 8% in both once a quarter and once a year, and still 6% of folks are rarely or never doing any sort of board communication. And then I'm going to move on to the next one. What do you usually talk about in your reports to the board? Select one of the following. The options here are compliance, financial status of the utility, staffing, or supply concerns. Great, and so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll in about 3 seconds. So 3, 2, and 1. Okay. 56%, that's a clear majority, are actually talking about the financial status of the utility. And then we do still have in the sort of second place spot, 23% are talking about the bad news. So I'm going to go ahead and close that now.
All right.
All right. And then that's it for now, right, Tanya?
Yep, that's
okay.
All right. Good. Okay. So I'm so glad that we're talking to our boards pretty regularly, most of us. It's good you want to communicate at the regular meetings, not at other times, because of course we want to be following the open meetings laws and making sure that we're being as transparent as possible. And you want to, because you're going to present at regular meetings, you for sure want to get on the agenda, make sure that your board has some of those presentation materials or any reports or information to look at ahead of time, at least a few days ahead of time. They may not look at it, I know, they may not read it until they're sitting in the seat watching you walk up, and then they start reading it. But after you engage them with a story and tell them the stuff they need to know, they'll probably go back and read through to just learn more, and then they'll have it there in case they need to refer back. But giving them those materials ahead of time, getting on the agenda is really important. And then, this is just a suggestion. It's not, the diehard you must, but monthly for sure you want to be talking about any pressing issues, any like in the poll, any of the bad news that's coming up. And of course, those financials, like you all are likely doing, talking about the income, the water sales, keeping everything on the financial track. Quarterly, talk about those big purchases. What's the kind of long-term plan? Are we on track for that plan? And then annually, everyone does the consumer confidence report annually. So be sure ahead of that report, or as soon as it comes out, talk to your board about it. Tell them what it means, go through it, so that if a community member asks them about it, because this is probably the one and only time the community ever thinks about their water and their water quality, they get that, and they don't a lot of times understand what any of that means, and they might ask a board member. Prepare the board members to answer those questions. Give them kind of the rundown, give them some elevator speech kind of tidbits to share with a community member if they come up and ask what this is or what it means. The board members should look knowledgeable, and they're only knowledgeable if you share what they should know or could know about the utility. So again, it's one of those things. They look good, you look good, you look good, they look good. As you're sharing with the board, this slide, I'm not going to go through it very detailed, but again, you don't want too many options. You don't want to go in too much detail. Your board members don't need to know how to run the utility or all about every lab that you do. So really tailor what you're sharing with them, but share with them as much information as they want to know so that they can, again, be responsive to the community. So if you're given monthly reports, this is the thing you do the most often, monthly or quarterly reports, what should be in them? Well, for sure, we want to do any compliance things. One of those priorities that your board members should probably do have is the health and safety of their community. Let's talk to that. Let's talk to that priority when we're sharing with the board. Tell stories about how staff go above and beyond ensuring that you're meeting Safe Drinking Water Act regulations. Talk about, the good, the bad, and the ugly of, testing. How many times you test. I mean, having that little tidbit, that piece of information in their back pocket. My utility tests the water 1,400 times a month, or whatever that number is. Let the board know that so they can rattle that off to community members that ask about their water safety. And then include the compliance stuff in every report. Talk about large operational changes. Boards don't like to be surprised. So the best thing you can do is talk early and often about any changes that are going to happen. There are a lot of things on the board's plate, so they may have to hear about something a few times, written in a report, told to them at a board meeting, written in another report, told at another board meeting, and then the change happens. Be sure they're really up to date, and you kind of keep emphasizing any changes that are about to happen. New changes could be a new billing system. The bills are going to look different. They need, when a concerned customer calls, my bill is crazy, I don't know what it says. They can respond, oh, we got a new billing system. Here's how you read your bill. So they're not like, oh, I wonder why the bill looks different. They should know that they're getting a new billing system. Is there a new treatment process that's going to make the water taste or look different? Changes can be good, or changes can be a surprise to everyone, or not good, but be sure to let the board know what to expect. Depending on where you live, this might be a thing, it might not. Your geography and climate may make talking about water supply status, something you talk about every month. Maybe it's not something your community worries about because you're flush with water, so you talk about it yearly or every few years. But this is kind of goes to that community sustainability thing and planning for the future. So that's kind of a geographical one. Are there goals that the community has, or that the water utility has, or that the city or community that you come from have that you're tracking? Be sure to update the board every time you see them, or at least quarterly, about how you're going. Are you trying to reduce the number of customer complaints? Are you trying to reduce your water loss? Tell the board how that's going. If it's going good, or even if it's going not so good, keep them updated on those goals. Be sure to talk about how awesome your employees are. This, you know, the board members want to have good people, and a good board understands that when the staff of the utility make the utility look good, they're looking good. So highlight the great people that you have working for you. You know, did Sharon pass her level 2 certification exam? Did a dedicated group of folks work overnight in the ice and snow to fix a water leak for hotel guests so the hotel wouldn't lose business? Did Hank go down and teach the 4th graders about where their water comes from at the water festival this year? Talk to 4th graders, get some quotes, show some thank you notes, you know, take pictures of Hank and Sharon doing their thing. You know, really be sure to highlight your employees with your board, so that then the board can go out into the community and kind of show off how awesome the water utility. You need to give them kind of that ammunition to use out in the community to show what a great place, what a great utility you have, and a great place to live your community is. All right, this one was on the polling question. Boards do not want to read about bad news in the paper the next morning. They want to be the ones who tell the story to the paper so that they can say, here's the bad news, but here's how we're addressing it. Don't be afraid to give bad news. And the sooner you give the bad news, the better. And then, you know, have a plan to, you know, what are we going to, this is the bad news, here's how we plan to fix it, so that the board has all that information when someone from the community comes to talk to them. And if you've been, before the bad news happens, if you've been communicating on a regular basis and building that trust and respect and knowledge sharing, the bad news is going to be easier to take, and it won't be one of those things where someone's head needs to roll. It's just, you know, everybody knows bad things happen, you know, water pipes break, you know, funding goes kaput sometimes. It just, you know, as things happen, be sure to keep that board in the loop. Be transparent. Don't let the board be surprised. All right, we got to talk about money, of course, every month. Don't just say, here's how much it costs to run the utility. They need detailed costs, not, you know, every little expenditure, but overall, you know, how much does it cost to run the plant, you know, energy use? How much are our salaries? How much are our contracts? What's the chemical bill? And then tell them what, you know, our chemical bill is this. We use the chemicals to do these things to protect the community. Give them that point of connection to those priorities that they have as you're talking about the funding and how it's divided up. Because then that gives them an understanding about what they'll need to know if potential cuts need to come down the line. They'll know what could be cut and what shouldn't be cut for safety for the community. All right, asset conditions, you know, that analogy of if that the nation's water infrastructure is eligible for Medicare. It's old, it's getting older every day, and things are going to start breaking, and we have to be prepared for that and start replacing as well. There's not very much of our infrastructure out there that's like a millennial, you know, we're baby boomer or beyond. So be sure to tell them about the conditions, show them pictures. You know, if someone tells me, oh, that pipe's 60 years old, I don't know what, as a board member, I don't know what a 60-year-old pipe looks like. Maybe that looks great, or maybe it looks, you know, maybe it's crumbling and falling apart. I don't know what a 60-year-old pipe looks like. So showing pictures, you talking about those and then why it's happening, why, we've got corrosive water, we've got, really lots of we have basic water, so it's starting to get, starts closing up. Prepare them for potential failures. Say, because of the age of our system, these are the types of things we might start seeing, leaks, those sorts of things. Let them know it helps them know where they can spend the money, and let them know where they can't cut funds. And then, let them know how other similar systems are stacking up. If the community down the road's been replacing pipes for 3 years and they're getting, like, they've reduced their leaks or breakages by a certain %, let your board know that. A little healthy competition never hurt anything. And likely, one community is not going to want to get outdone by the rival football team's community. So, use all the tools in your tool chest to turn up the heat just that little bit to get some action going. Be sure to talk about large issues with contractors. They don't need to know all the nitty-gritty details, the micro things going on, but something's not going well, again, no surprises. Things they don't need to know, how to operate the system, we talked about this. The minutia, every little thing you spend money on, they don't need to know. Just kind of that big picture, and then if they have questions about the details, share those. All right, things never to do. Never lie or guess. If they ask a question and you don't know, it does not hurt to say, I don't know that right now. Let me do a little research. I'll get back to you at the next meeting or in an email out to the board after this or something. You don't have to know everything, but you can always find out information. So they would rather you look it up and tell them later than to lie or guess. All right, so when you're talking about your community, when you're talking about health and safety, when you're talking about economic development, these are issues that get people passionate. And sometimes money, of course, money can get people all worked up. And so these are the things that could start a conversation that gets heated. Be sure to keep your cool. Remember, it's not personal. It's just about the work that you're doing. And if things are starting to go downhill, just don't be afraid to say, hey, let's stop here. I'll do a little more research. I'll look at these things, come back, at the next meeting to discuss this. Don't let it get too heated where things just spiral downhill. It's okay to kind of pause and regroup and start again at the next meeting. Again, like I said, use visuals, use videos, take them on a tour, take them outside and show them what a 60-year-old pipe looks like that's in the ground, or show them what a leak looks like through a video and how quickly your team responds and fixes it. We're a very visual society now, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all those things. Reading in reports, okay, but if you can show me a picture or a video, I'm totally much more in it. So, so use those tools. I know no one's ever done it before, but it doesn't mean you can't start doing it now. And then don't sugarcoat anything. Again, board members are used to hearing things that are less than great news. Their job is to help deal with those. And so the more transparent you can be, it builds trust. And if you feel there's a substantial red flag coming down the pike, don't be afraid to tell your board. Okay, I'm going to go. I decided I need to rearrange my last few slides. So do the work for the board. You're the expert. They're looking to you as a trusted resource about the utility. So if there's a decision to be made, be sure to give them some options. Here's the problem. Here are 3 options that I like, the best ones I think for the community, and give them the possible options. If they want more, you can give them more, but give them the top 3 that you think are best. Talk about the life cycle costs. Just because it's the lowest bid doesn't mean that it's going to be the lowest overall cost. There might be more labor and maintenance costs in the future. Be sure to outline that so that they know how best to spend those public funds. And then do your research on how to pay ahead of time. Provide them a list of finance options. And if you're going to use some reserve funds, let them know how soon that reserve will be replenished. And then think about all the frequently asked questions that they might have so that you are able to respond to those. And then again, if you don't know, tell them you'll research it and come back to them. And don't forget to talk about what doing nothing costs. Sometimes you present stuff and then they just decide not to do any of it and do nothing. But again, that's a decision. That's a decision that has costs and consequences. So be sure that in those options that you give, do nothing is one, and you calculate the costs and the repercussions of that. But again, don't give them too many options. They don't need every single option. Rely on your expertise and narrow it down for them. However, don't make too many assumptions about what you think is best. Sometimes the board has a different perspective or some good feedback that might be enlightening and helpful. So be sure to listen to your board if they have suggestions and things as well. So I hope I have effectively communicated to you about effectively communicating to your board today. Hopefully you found a few new tools to put in your toolbox to talk to your board. Having a good communication, again, is the difference between a great place to work and a well-run system versus a place where nobody wants to work and a system that's failing. So put in a little time to strategize and prepare to develop stories or examples or videos that engage and inspire your board to do the work of making decisions for the water utility. And again, no one gets it right every time. There are going to be miscommunications and frustrations, but the more often and honestly you can communicate with your board, the rough patches will resolve themselves pretty quickly. And that's all I've got.
Great. So Tanya, I was wondering, do we want to do your last poll now before we get to the questions?
Yeah, let's do the last poll.
Awesome, great. So
you go away. I know you.
I think we should do your poll, and then I also have just 2 questions about our blog and technical assistance too. So based on this, what is one new communication technique you're going to try in the next month? So you can pick your favorite. You do your best to just pick, if you want to do more than one, obviously that would be great, but just pick the one that makes you really excited. And I do think we're going to give you a couple more seconds here to just get those votes in. Looks like almost everyone has done it, so I'm closing this poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right. So wow, so it looks like 39%, that's the majority, are going with the start with a story option, which is awesome. And then using visuals is also pretty popular. That's 28%. And yeah, kind of evenly split the rest of them, speaking to the board priorities and providing solutions. Those are sort of equal. And then I know we're doing a couple more polls, but I just want to give everyone the opportunity, if they would like, to subscribe to the EFCM blog. Like I said, this is a resource with good tools and descriptions of success stories and lessons learned. So we can do that for you now. If not, feel free to check it out on our website anytime anyway. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And one last poll, and this is the last one. Are you interested in receiving in-depth technical assistance? We talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but this is one of the services the EFCM provides to small systems. And there's always, if you don't want to, not sure right now, but if you think you're considering it, you can always look on our website. But this is one way we can follow up with you. All right. I'm closing this, and it looks like we have a couple more minutes for questions. So please go ahead and put your questions into the question dialog box, and we can get started with those. We did get one question through the chat. It looks like there's a couple more coming in. So one question that kind of came up earlier through the chat, not through the questions, but what are some good ways to engage the board when you need to ask them to review a document or do something or look at a plan?
Yes, Well, for sure, you want to give them ample time and a deadline. You know, if it's too open-ended, they just keep putting it off and putting it off. I would for sure maybe use that story element. Talk about develop a story that puts meaning to the document you're wanting to review, have them review or and look at. You know, tell a story about the impact that that's going to have, or you know, if it's I'm trying to think what, like if it's a safety one, like for to look at the safety and of your system, then talk about a safety concern that you have and how you fixed it, or how this document will help you fix something in the past that was kind of a dropped ball in the past. You know, make that connection to give it some importance and not just a box to be checked. And I think that might motivate, kind of turn up the heat just a little bit for some action. And also, if it's too big of a chunk of work, that's difficult for folks. You know, I mean, this is just an idea. Is it something you could divide up into chunks, or is there a certain piece that you really want them to look at, and then the rest of the document is kind of just what it is, but you really need their input on this piece? Breaking it down into a chunk that's more manageable is sometimes helpful as well.
All right, so we have a couple more questions. I think if we have enough time to get to them. What is the best way to communicate when board members have very limited utility experience? Is the question.
Sure. Show them what they're working with. Yeah, I mean, before I started working at the Environmental Finance Center, I knew very little about my water utility. And how did I learn? I went out there and I did tours. I talked to the folks that worked there. If you know, hopefully every year you're taking your board on a tour of something. You know, they might not go to every part and piece every year, but for sure, you know, do an open house. Maybe it's donuts in the morning before work starts and you take them on a short tour. And if a tour is not possible, be sure to show them pictures of what you're doing, and again, provide that that impact. Like showing them a pump doesn't help them, because you know, they don't know what you want them to do with that information. Okay, that's a pump. Do you want me to just buy you a new one? Is it broken? What do we do? What does this pump do? Well, this is the pump that pulls the water from the river and then delivers it to the water system, and talk about that. Tell them exactly the purpose and how it provides water or makes the water safer. Give context to all the stuff that you show them. A lot of times we, as operators, we get bogged down in the technical, and you don't think about the big picture and the meaning and behind all the technical pieces that you have. But when you're talking to folks, they need that connection to why it's important. How does this give me water or make my water safer?
All right, and then this question, this is pretty wide open, but someone commented that politics seems to be the biggest issue with her board. Do you have any suggestions for maybe dealing with disparate political or sort of internal board politics issues?
Sure. Yes, that can be a barrier, and I think that's where that you know, that knob of turning up the heat or hitting the triggers can just cause the frustrations where everybody just puts their walls up and does nothing. And I think, I don't want to seem like a broken record, but stories really help break those walls down, because if you're telling a story about a real thing that happened, you know, with real people and their responses, and how, you know, the people responded, or the technology worked, or how the mechanical or infrastructure functioned or didn't function, those things aren't political. You can't, those aren't something breaking, it's broken. How do we fix it? You can't not fix it. Economic development, you know, you can hit those triggers through a story without taking a political side, and each side of the spectrum can see that in their own way and connect to the story. You know, how are these leaks and breakages impacting families? How is it impacting the economic development? You know, those things are all impacted. The things that those people care about on all the sides of the spectrum are impacted by your water utility. Telling stories about that can hit all their trigger points to help them see the importance of making sure your utility is functioning well, is well funded, enough. You know, we're not just funding it so we can spend all the taxpayers' money. We're funding it so that our economy can thrive, so our schools can be good, so we can attract new people into our community.
All right. That's great. And we are just at the very top of the hour, so I wanted to mention that I just sent out a link to our webinar evaluation into the chat. So if you can if you have a few minutes and you feel like filling that out for us, that would be great. We really use the responses to improve our webinars, and it is now 3 p.m., so I will throw it back to you, Tanya, for any closing comments.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for taking time out today to talk a little bit about communication. I just encourage you to try a story, you know, try making those connections with your board, and just to keep communicating. Even if it feels like you're hitting brick walls right and left, just keep at it. It can't go wrong.
Great.